Hello everyone, this is Derek, or Like It 101. Welcome to another role-playing video. Today's video is going to be about mass combat and my take on it. Now, I really thoroughly enjoy having mass combat in my campaigns. It just provides that great heroic feeling of seeing armies clash and making your characters really feel the intense struggle of armies coming together and clashing. However, I know some people are a little put off by mass combat and the intricate nature of armies colliding. But today I'm going to present in hopefully 6 or 7 simple steps my way of putting together mass combat. So let's get right into it and start off with my interpretation of mass combat, if you will. So, first and foremost, this will only work if your characters are not generals in the army. I feel if you give your characters that kind of power within an army, you're going to make way too much hassle for yourself. Generals in an army are typically the ones that stay in the back and say, okay, this line has to move here, this line has to attack here, we need the archers over there, we need the cavalry division to sweep in along the forest from the left, and that just creates too much effort or rules or complications on your part, on the player's part. All new rules need to be made. So, rule number 1, do not make your players generals. You can still have them lead a unit, but do not give them control of the whole army. Okay, next rule. Since they're not going to be generals, as I said, you can give them a small unit. The easiest way for me to describe it would be, there's a game that came out for the Xbox called Kingdom Under Fire. And in that game, each character that you played as was given a unit, say a soldier unit or archery unit that you had control of. They moved directly behind you, the player. Excuse me. And as they moved behind you, when you clashed with other units, they went right to work battling the enemy, and you went forward as the player and battled out beside them. That is an option as in mass combat. So if you're going to go that route, it becomes a little more difficult, but using some of the rules I'm going to explain will still be a viable way to really provide that scope and scale of mass combat. So, first things first, you as the DM must set up the scene where the armies are about to collide. Describe your player's placement in the formation within the battle lines, the massive amount of enemies that lie before them, the people standing around them, what do they smell, what do they hear, what are the other players doing, what are the other NPCs doing, how are they feeling, what is the weather like, is the sun in their eyes. Describe all of this as like a giant set piece that they're going to be set up before them before you even get into the combat itself. By setting up this scene, what you do is you paint the picture in your player's mind. You set up this massive scale battle where they are but one person within this massive amount of other people. And what this does is it creates that little spark in your player's mind that, wow, this battle is going to be so huge, how are we ever going to get out of this? Now, step 2, the order is given by whatever NPC that is in the general's position, the captain's position, king's position, whatever it is. Describe the armies charging across, the emotions that the NPCs are displaying, the shouting, the charging, the galloping of hooves, of horses, or what other form of cavalry you have, siege engines going off, flying overhead, flying units even, as they clash together, that first initial strike. And then describe the moment that the players enter the fray. That one pinnacle moment that one breathless moment where the two armies just collide and just clash together, and then they're lost in the army of enemies. Now that is the crucial moment, because this is the moment that they have entered combat and they have no idea when it's going to end. So this is where you as a DM get to put up a little bit of a smoke screen, if you will. And you get to make this easy on yourself as a DM, but to a player, if you pull it off, they will never know that you've even done it. So, describe the enemies that are around them. Describe the NPCs that have made it up to the point with them, to fighting around them. Now think about every great movie that you've seen, fantasy or otherwise, that has had a giant battle in it. Think about, the easiest example I guess would be to say, think about Lord of the Rings. Think about any of the large-scale battles in it. What happens? We're given that great setup like I just described, but then we're going in right behind with the camera swooping down onto one of our heroes. So that's what we're going to do. As a DM, swoop down close behind your player. Make them the focal point. So now that group of players is all together, a couple NPCs behind them maybe, fighting alongside them, and here come the enemies. Only about 5 or 6 initially, right? Maybe it was 1 or 2 for each player. Just enough to overwhelm them a little bit. Just enough to give them that little taste. That's it. Just describe those 6. Set up the information about the players being in the fight and the other enemies around them, but focus only on those 6 or 7 enemies that the players are fighting. That's it. Now, after that combat has finished out and those 6 enemies are dead, all you have to do is describe, okay, you move forward or left or right in the fray and here comes some more enemies. In that one little breathless moment where they go, okay, we did it. What next? Describe the siege engines going off. Describe the death throes of a horse nearby on the ground, or a soldier bleeding out, and just motioning, help me or something. And then that some emotional tie-in that they realize, oh God, there are other things going on here just besides us. And then put more enemies in front of them. That's all you have to do. Just put a few more. You can say maybe they've reached the elite unit by now of the enemy, and they're hush falls over the surroundings, and a banner comes flying forward, and it's the immortal legion of hell that has come up to face you. And then they realize, oh man, well here this is, but beside me is this NPC that I don't even know, but he's fighting by my side. That's all you have to do for mass combat, is simply bring out 6 or 7 enemies and remind the player of their surroundings, that there is a larger scale battle going on. That's all. So, here's what we've got so far. We've set up the scene, number 1. We've described the armies. We've brought the armies together. We've had an initial contact. We've had initial encounters. We've moved through. We've described the scenery again. We moved on to a second combat. We describe it again. Bring in some NPCs maybe. Simple steps. Just remember to keep bringing it forward just a little bit. But how do you end it? How can you really end a mass combat scenario? Excuse me one moment while I take a drink. Always important to stay hydrated. How do you really end mass combat? Think about it. How does mass combat really end? With retreat, with surrender, with destruction. Those are the only 3 options. You can say that, the players have been, really charging through on this one corner of the battlefield. The left flank has fallen, the army has crumpled, and while their corner that they've been leading and the men that have survived behind them are really pushing forward, they've lost the left flank. Their army has to retreat because they've lost the left side. Maybe the loss on those left sides has crippled them enough to push them back. And maybe that's a devastating loss that the players will want to recuperate at camp and, really see the devastation and then move forward again. Maybe it's, they've overpowered the enemy and then they've retreated into the castle and then it becomes a full-out siege. Or maybe the army routs and they just run away. It's all up to you as the DM. But remember that behind the complexities of large-scale combat, There are just a few simple steps that you as the DM get to put up a little smoke and mirrors and make it seem a lot more difficult than it actually is. So remember, set the scene, describe the initial encounter, bring up a couple of NPCs that are fighting alongside. Maybe they die, maybe they live, it doesn't really matter. Describe the fray around the players that reminds them that there's a larger scale battle going on. Move forward with another encounter, continue to describe, and then remember how you want it to end. Do you want them to win? Do you want them to lose? Do you want it to be a stalemate? It's all up to you. But these simple steps will really help you enjoy mass combat without having to create a giant set of rules to really make it more difficult on yourself. Just a few little encounters, 6 or 7 enemies, maybe 10, but it just has to be these little groups, these little couplets of encounters. That's it. Don't worry about, oh, I need 40 or 50 guys, or oh, how am I going to come up with a stat block for a legion of wizards or magicians, or oh, we've got archers on the left flank. How am I supposed to say, okay, 120 archers are going to attack at the same time? Don't do that to yourself. Just remember, small groups. That's the key. Small groups and the imagery. Small groups and imagery are the two most important things to take away from this video. The small groups and the imagery. The imagery will be all brought up in the player's mind, and they themselves will create the mass combat for you. So, this has been Mass Combat, my take on it. I hope you all have enjoyed it, and I will hopefully be putting out a couple more videos today. So, happy gaming.